Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Nori Parelius, PhD, is a scientist by day and a blogger, writer, and overthinker by night. She used to be a chubby, nerdy kid with bad knees, but thanks to her interest in nutrition and exercise, she managed to grow up to be a healthy, although still nerdy adult with much better knees. She is constantly diving into new topics and interesting rabbit holes, from health and fitness to fertility, productivity, mental health, sustainability, and especially low carbohydrate, ketogenic, and carnivore diets in a quest to figure out how to best human in our modern world. Nori has a PhD in biophysics, but her current day job is in data science. Born and raised in Slovakia, she now lives in Norway with her Viking husband and two small wildlings. I met Nori virtually in Dr. Anthony Chaffee's book club, which is one of my favorite discussions on a Zoom call every week when I can attend. We chatted about our book club on episode 563 of Boundless Body Radio, and an episode titled Dr. Anthony Chaffee's Fantastic Book Club with host Olivia Khwaja and a few special guests. You can follow and read Nori's wonderful and self-proclaimed ramblings on her website at www.noriparelius.com. Nori, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you, Casey. I'm so excited to be here. This is
Uh,
my first podcast appearance, and I'm
uh,
glad it's your podcast. I'm very excited. Thank you
that's
for
very
inviting
kind.
me.
Absolutely. I couldn't help but invite you. We have obviously communicated quite a bit through the book club. As I alluded to in the introduction, I can't always make it every week, but the times I can make it, I really love the discussion. I love what you bring to the table. You always bring something very highly intelligent. I remember if it was just a few weeks ago, we were talking about something and you were saying, like, I don't know if you guys can believe this, but I was actually a pretty nerdy kid growing up. And I think I was on mute, but I just started laughing to myself. Like, I don't think you're surprising anybody by saying you're like a book nerd as a kid. I think everybody already knows that about you or can at least assume that to be true.
Good point. I mean, yes, you're right.
And I just have to say, besides not pronouncing your last name exactly correctly in Slovakian in the introduction, those were your words and not mine, calling you nerdy and a chubby kid and that kind of thing. Just want to make sure that that was not not me saying that. That was your own self-proclaimed introduction.
Oh, oh yes, oh yes. I mean, I guess that's kind of my sense of humor, but it's also all true. I was a little ball when I was in second grade, so chubby is maybe a bit of an understatement, but it was kind of the 90s chubby, it was different standards back
Yeah,
then.
very different. Yeah, I was a husky kid growing up. They always called me, and I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew it wasn't great. But yeah, it's a lot different than it is now for sure. And I do want to talk about your story and your upbringing. You have a lot of interesting nuances that I want to get into, and frankly, a bunch of things that I don't even know. So a lot of the questions I'll ask you will be just straight up honest questions. But before we dive into that, we'll talk a little bit more about book club later on in the discussion. But just to start out, like, how has your experience been so far in this book club, Dr. Anthony Chaffee's book club that you can go on to Patreon and pay for? I've been part of it for about a year and a half. I don't the few bucks a month that I have to pay for it. I love the discussion. What has your experience been so far in the book club?
I love that book club. It's one of the highlights of my week. Don't always get to go, but I really try to. For me in Europe, it's in the middle of the day because we try to accommodate for everyone around the world, and it's not easy. So I often have to kind of leave work early or something, just to get to participate in the book club. But it's just full of such amazing, smart, thoughtful people that many of them I consider my friends now. I joined the book club. I joined Dr. Chaffee's Patreon solely because of the book club, because they were going to discuss, it was Simon Hill's book, Proof is in the Plants, or I believe that's what it's called. And I thought it was so admirable that they were picking a book that was defending the opposite view of what the whole group believes. And I thought that was such a great opportunity to dive into those arguments. And I think it's important that we challenge what we believe, because it's so easy to just fall for confirmation bias and just look at whatever supports your already held opinion. So I joined the book club to participate in the reading of Simon Hill's Proof is in the Plants, and I never left because I just love the people. I love the discussions. We always go over time. It's like it's 2.5 hours sometimes.
Yep.
So the only problem with the book club is it's hard to find time for it, but it's just such an amazing group of people,
It really is.
and we're having so much fun. And I've learned so much and read so many very interesting and cool and useful books just because we've been reading them, and then that added um, value of discussing it with other people. I find it amazing. I mean, I love that book club.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so interesting you mentioned like the discussions and the learning and I also respect highly the decision to read material that doesn't exactly line up with what we think, and to discuss that and be frank about it and really try to find like what are their arguments and what are they right about, and we can try to build bridges with other people. I think is amazing. What you said about people calling in from around the world, it's not the best time for me to get onto the book club, but I appreciate that it's only like 6 in the morning, generally my time, and people are waking up sometimes at 2 in the morning or staying up way past what would be my bedtime to join because it's that meaningful to them. I think that's a wonderful point. I'm surely you've been part of other groups, maybe a book club, maybe not book club, maybe other groups where you met people around the world. And I've kind of made this point recently, and I'm curious to hear what you think about it. Why is it that you said this book club in particular, you've met friends that are like, they feel like your best friends around the world? Like, again, comparing that to other groups, other conferences, other things you've done in your professional or personal career, why do you think it's different that this group feels like they're all just your friends automatically? Like you've never met these people, but I would be willing to bet that if anybody needed anything, they could call anybody in the book club and they would get help right then. And I don't know that that's true in other kind of groups. Why do you think that is?
That's a good question. And especially when I think about other relationships that develop online, or like you join some Facebook group, uh, and you run into trolls and some hostility, and more likely than a group this supportive and friendly. I don't know why it is. I think one of the things is Olivia Khwaja, who leads the book club, is doing such an amazing job. Uh, but I don't think it's I mean it's all the people who are joining, and maybe it's the fact that I mean it's a carnivore book club, although we're reading much more than just carnivore books. And I feel like a lot of people join carnivore because they in a way have to, or at least that's what the situation was until recently. It wasn't a mainstream thing. It was mostly people who were desperate, and that sometimes means that they have some difficult experiences under their belt and maybe a more empathy towards others, but also a very strong growth mindset and trying to be better and be a better person. um, Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. It's maybe we're just lucky. Maybe it's just that.
Maybe that's a very scientific answer. I would expect nothing less from you. We're just speculating. It's interesting. Have you ever been to a low carbohydrate conference, like attended a low carb conference in person?
No, I haven't. I haven't. I live a bit remotely, I live in Norway.
Yeah.
I don't know if there have been any conferences here. Um, so no, I haven't.
Okay, interesting. So when I met Olivia the first time, it was at Low Carb Denver 2023. She took the trip across the pond from England to make it to Denver to attend that conference. And before the conference, this is like one of the best decisions I ever made. I put out a little invite to anybody to appear to do like a really quick interview style kind of discussion that I compiled into a big episode that I did, and was just out to strangers, anybody who was attending. Let's find some space in a hallway and let's just record. Tell me about your story, why you're here at this conference, what you'd like about it. Olivia was one of the people that signed up. You go to these conferences and there's hundreds, thousands of people, and you meet people and you talk to people and whatever. But like, I would probably not have met her in that way had she not signed up for that. And you sit down and talk with her, and it's like you're describing, like immediately Olivia and I are like great friends. Like she's awesome. I love her. And I made the argument that like more than any other conference, when you get into a room with people that are ketogenic everybody's ketogenic. Their energy is so high. They're so positive. They've gone through that healing, like you mentioned. It's just electric. It's absolutely amazing. I hope you get to have that experience one day and attend one in person, because when you get a group of people that all feel that way, that are all asking honest and genuine questions, and if nothing else, are just in a ketogenic state, the energy is just off the charts.
I would love to experience that one day. But yeah, I think you're onto something with people who are keto seem to be calmer,
Yeah.
more
Yep.
stable moods. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Well said. Okay. Well, let's get back to your own story. Tell us about what it was like to grow up in Slovakia. What was the kind of health status that again led you to what you described as kind of being like chubby kid in the 90s. Yeah. Let's talk about your own health and your health story.
Yeah, well, I sometimes say that I was raised on candy and milk. I was a very picky eater, so that didn't make it easier for my parents. But I mean, my husband, when he first visited Slovakia, he was horrified by the dessert after breakfast, dessert after lunch, dessert after dinner, at least in my family.
Wow.
But in Slovakia, we also have a lot of sweet dishes as main dishes. It's like pasta with sugar and poppy seeds or something. It's it's
Wow.
it's a lot of these sweet dishes that we really love. Even at school, every Monday we used to have a sweet dish for lunch, which was basically equivalent to dinner because it was like a bigger meal. And I was in the school cafeteria. It would be
Wow.
it would be basically cake for lunch. Um, and I guess that is one of the reasons why I ended up being a chubby kid. The other one was stress because I was a sensitive child, so I was stress eating since second grade. So um, that just led to me sort of using candy to calm my nerves. And it's a coping mechanism that I still battle with. And I'd say that I'm definitely addicted to sugar. So that was, and I only realized that when I tried to go keto, and realized that I hardly could do it. And any kind of sweet taste, even now after what is 5 years of carnivore, anything sweet will send me into a binge, um, which sadly still sometimes happens, but not very often.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, growing up, I was a bit of a chubby kid, loved my candy. Unlike most people nowadays, I guess I never went on a diet. I never really tried to lose weight. I always felt like, oh well, someone's gonna like me for other things. But then my health started going downhill, and I basically made the switch when not long after I had my first kid, because I always had some health problems that were never properly diagnosed and I never really knew what it was. It was skin issues, digestive issues, and I kind of always just felt like that's just life. Um, well, it wasn't just life, because it was getting worse. Then I was actually diagnosed with histamine intolerance,
Mm.
which was supposed to explain everything. But going on a low histamine diet did not, it wasn't enough. It was better. It was better. I even lost quite a bit of weight at that time. I was about 25. Um, but I still had the skin issues. I still had digestive problems, and I always just felt like, oh, there must have been too much histamine in whatever I ate. But low histamine diet is just so difficult to adhere to and so individual. And I mean, I was even told that whatever I tolerate, whether I tolerate something or not, might depend on the weather.
Wow. Wow.
So that was. that was kind of tricky. And at that time, it was also very new. So I was actually diagnosed in Slovakia, and in Norway, they didn't even know what histamine intolerance was.
Hmm.
Uh, so that was very difficult. And then my oldest daughter, she had really serious, well, not really serious, but she clearly had food allergies that we noticed right after she was born. Like within 2 weeks, we saw that something was wrong, and she was having a lot of digestive problems. Uh, she would often have even like blood in her stools, which is not what a parent wants to see.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was really horrible, and it was really difficult to find out what she was reacting to. So we quickly found out that she was reacting to cow's milk and eggs, which I immediately stopped eating because I was breastfeeding her. But it wasn't enough. It was just like the problems were continuing, and for babies that small, they can't even do proper tests, and those tests are not conclusive. So we were just told to maybe try, or like she'll grow out of it. Um, but we were not ready to just wait for her to grow out of it. She was covered in eczema. And yeah, like she would have constant loose stools and blood sometimes. And so we were just trying everything. Um, and I was really determined to breastfeed her for as long as possible, to give her the best nutrition that I could, especially under the circumstances. So I was, for the first almost a year, it was just my diet that has to be restricted. Afterwards, when she started eating solids, we had to be careful with her as well. And and I mean, she started getting more allergies because I was trying to avoid the main allergens, so I wasn't eating anything with wheat, but I was eating rye bread, like pure rye, and she developed an allergy to rye.
Wow.
So I kind of realized that I must have a leaky gut and she must have had a leaky gut. And whatever both of us were eating, or any of us was eating, was just going straight into her bloodstream, and her immune system was reacting. So one of the last things before carnivore that we tried was so-called rotation diet. I don't know if you've heard about it.
No, I haven't.
It's developed exactly for these situations, for people who are quick to develop allergies. And the idea is that you don't eat the same, a few foods from the same food group 2 days in a row, but wait 4 days between exposing the body to the same antigens from the food. So if you eat an apple on day one, then you're not going to eat anything related to apples for the next 3 days.
Wow.
It's it's insane trying to stick to that,
That
because it
sounds
was
really
like,
tough.
I think we lasted like 2 months with spreadsheets of
Oh my
which
goodness.
plants are related and which aren't.
Wow.
And it's like, okay, I had a sweet potato yesterday, so probably nothing. Or I don't even remember, but like brassica family, like, okay, today I can have all the brassicas, so I can have cauliflower and cabbage and whatnot. And it was a nightmare. And after that, my husband saw some carnivore things online, and I think it was the Andersons, the Charlene, and I don't remember his name, but they're long-term carnivores, and they were one of the first people that I people talked about, because this was in 2019. And he was just looking at them, and he was like, these people only eat meat, and it helped them with so many things. And we were like, whatever, we're trying that.
Really? Like that quick? Did you need much more convincing?
No,
Really?
no, yeah. I mean, by that point, we have tried so much. I was I was about 10 kilos, which is like what, 20 pounds lighter than I am now.
Yeah.
I was I was constantly sick. I had rashes. I had horrible digestion. I was sick myself. I didn't know what to eat. and we had to put like topical corticosteroids on my daughter because she had such horrible eczema on her face that we were risking she would have scars. Um, it was just bad. It was bad, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna get scurvy within a month. Let's go.
Wow.
And it took about a week for a lot of it to improve. It
One
was
week.
like 1 week. Within a week, we saw massive improvement, and that was a miracle. Like I sometimes I say that I wouldn't be here if it weren't for carnivore, and I'm convinced of that. I don't know where I would be, but I think I would either be dead or hospitalized or institutionalized somewhere because my mental health was terrible, what with everything going on, and I was I was not getting enough food. I was breastfeeding on top of that, and I mean the stress of it all. I was really not doing well, and I didn't even know how badly I was doing until it all went away, and I realized like, oh, I used to have anxiety. Now it's gone.
Yeah.
It was for me, carnivore was a miracle, and I I'm so grateful that I found it at that time. I just wish would have found it earlier.
Totally. Yeah. Wow. So that was 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we said we both share the same like carniversary year. My carniversary was in April of 2019. You mentioned the anxiety. I knew some things would probably improve with carnivore. I'd been low carb and keto for a while. That was the most shocking thing. And I would say the strongest argument for myself to stay on the diet. There's so many different benefits, but that for me, it took about 10 days, 2 weeks where the anxiety dropped out and realizing that I was not spinning around worrying about things that were never going to happen to me was such a relief. That alone was so worth it to stay on the diet and just be abstinent of the other things. It's so amazing. And it's like some of our guests have described, like if it's foggy outside and you don't know that you're in the fog, you don't know. You don't realize how little visibility you have until it clears and it goes away and you realize, wow, I can see way further. But when you're in the middle of it, you have no idea how bad it can get.
No, exactly. I mean, I never even considered that I had anxiety until I didn't.
Yeah, well
And
said.
yeah,
Wow.
and so now my husband is mostly carnivore as well, although he has his treat days, because he's a he's a lucky one. He's just healthy and has no actual real health problems, but he still feels the benefits of being carnivore anyway, and the mental health as well. Like he says that he does get more anxious when he has his treat day, but he's okay with that trade-off.
Yeah, good for him. That's amazing. Wow, what a cool story. You mentioned the sugar addiction thing before, and one of my hockey buddies, was just asking me about my diet and asked me specifically, like, do you ever eat cake? And I turned around and asked him, like, okay, when you eat a piece of cake, can you have one piece and put the cake away and not think about cake for the rest of the day? And he like looked at me like I was insane. He's like, well, yeah, of course. And I'm like, dude, I can't do that. Like, I have the cake, I want more cake, and then I just think about the cake. And he looks at me like I was nuts. And it's like, dude, you'll never understand my brain. I'll never understand yours. It sounds amazing that you can have a piece of cake. I would love to have a piece of cake every now and again. But the problem is when that triggers those cravings that you talk about, it's so uncomfortable. The anxiety comes back. My sleep sucks. It's just not worth it for people that, whatever degree you think you have sugar addiction, if it kicks off cravings and you start consuming more than you think you want, it's really uncomfortable. It's worth it to stay abstinent of all sugar in that situation.
Definitely. I mean, that's my experience too. I can't have it, and I've been dealing with that ever since I went carnivore. And in the beginning, I guess the euphoria of it all, it was sort of easier. But after a while, I don't know. I guess I felt better and felt like, oh, I probably could have a little piece, right? What is one cookie, right? What's one cookie? One cookie doesn't make a difference, yes, but one cookie is never one cookie. And I mean, it took me a while to admit to myself that I have a problem. I remember once I had a full sleeve of cookies. I don't know if they're Oreos or something similar. And I ate about 3/4 of it during one evening because I was having one of those binges, as I usually say, ending up in the ditch, the metaphorical ditch. And it doesn't always happen, but that day I just reacted really badly to it. And I had a really bad stomach, and I was actually throwing up half the night.
Wow.
Ending up with falling asleep on the bathroom floor at 6 a.m. I woke up 2 hours earlier, and my first thought was, are there any cookies left?
Oh my goodness.
And I was just like, that is not good.
Yep.
That is not how this should be.
Wow.
So, and that was not my last binge. It wasn't. But the time between them is getting longer and longer. So last time I managed 7 months. So
Wow, congratulations. It's hard to step away from because it tastes really good in the moment. It's fantastic. And you're right. Like, it's one cookie. What damage is one cookie going to do? But that's the problem. It's never just the one. You want more, and that you just fixate on it. And even things like fruit, like there's a whole subset of people who practice, what they call like animal-based or carnivore diet that's inclusive of, say, honey or fruit or whatever. Some people can handle it, but what I notice with the people that I coach is that drives that addiction right back into somebody, and they might not ever recover. And like, if I have a piece of fruit, it's not the fruit that I would argue is bad, but I just want more sugar after that. I want candy bars 20 minutes later. And so for some people, it sucks to admit, like you said, it takes a while to kind of, admit to yourself that you are, but you might have to realize that these things are not that great for you. And you might have to just completely abstain and stay away from them 100% of the time to really feel your optimal self. So it's just not worth it.
it's definitely not. I mean, I totally agree with you. And I admire people who can moderate, envy them a bit, but I can't. And I think many people cannot. And it's funny because I never used to binge before. Like, I never had trouble with this. I never would have known I was addicted to sugar because I never tried to restrict it.
Mm.
I was slightly overweight, but not that worried about it that I would actually try properly to diet. So I ate a lot of sugary things. I would have cereal in the morning, right? With a glass of juice. And then, whatever, maybe a piece of cake with lunch or some candy or apples or oatmeal. There's a lot of sugar in that stuff. And so even when I went on the low histamine diet, where I was avoiding a lot of packaged foods and processed foods, I would eat 5, 6 bananas daily.
Wow.
It was now that I think about it, I'm like, that's insane. But that's just what I was doing because bananas were okay. So I wanted them. So I basically just got my candy elsewhere.
Wow.
And I would never binge, but I was grazing. So I would just have a little bit and then wait 15, 20 minutes, an hour, right? Depending on what I was doing, how bored I was, or how worried about something. And whenever I had the need to eat something, I would just go and have a little bite. So I would never get to the point where I would feel like I ate too much. But the result was that I ate a lot of it throughout the day.
Mm.
And I mean, back when I was a teenager, I remember my parents once bought like a massive, like a 5 liter. I have no idea how much that is in other your kind of units, but it was like a
Neither do we.
massive jar of Nutella.
My goodness.
I think it lasted a month in our family. I would
Wow.
just grab a big spoon and go and get a spoon and then just eat that while I was watching TV or doing my homework or anything. And then a little later, I would be like, I think I want one more, and then go and just grab another spoon straight from the jar.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah, when that one was empty and we just had normal sized jars of Nutella, I realized that I could eat one in a day.
A whole jar.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was probably when I was at my heaviest and probably also the most anxious and depressed. But yeah, but I never really felt like I was overindulging because it was in these small bits.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that to myself. Like when you're in that space and you're not really paying attention, that's all just so normal. And you look around at most people, and lots of people would do that same thing. When you're on the other side of it, you might as well have just told me you just had like an entire bucket of cocaine, and then when that cocaine would run out, you just have a normal jar of cocaine, and you just would finish that off in one day. Like it's kind of what it sounds like. Like I'm like it sounds terrible.
I know, I know. I mean, I cringe when I think about it now. I'm like, what was I doing? What were my parents doing? But I don't blame them. They didn't know. They were doing the same.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Okay. So we mentioned in the introduction your bad knees. We know that you lost the weight on carnivore again, not a tremendous amount, but 10 kilos. That's fantastic. And that's, good weight to lose. But tell us about your bad knees and how that kind of evolved.
Oh yeah. That's a bit of a funny story because I was told when I was about 12 that I had worn cartilages in my knees. I had knee pain ever since I was, yeah, probably 10. And it got really bad when I was around 12 on like skiing trips with school and stuff. And I could not ski without stabbing pain in my knees. And it did not make any sense because I was not really that active as a child to warrant worn cartilages. Um, but that knee pain was kind of on and off for another decade. And it was in my early 20s when I think it was the first time when I tried to go to the gym, I think. It was one of those New Year's resolutions. And I thought like, well, maybe I should try to do something. And I went with some friends and I very quickly realized that I had no control over my body. Like I was not coordinated. I was weak and I was just gonna hurt myself. So I came home and I did what you do. I Googled how do you squat. And that's how I ran into Katie Bowman. She's a biomechanist. She writes books about movement and she had a blog article about how to squat. And it was the right kind of nerdy because I mean I was studying biophysics and so biomechanics was right up my alley and this was really explained in those terms like the mechanics of it and that just got me really interested in this movement science and through that in the fitness space. So I learned a lot by reading her books and then other books and then art scientific articles and textbooks and whatnot. So I learned a lot about movement and realized that my knees were not bad. It was my feet that were the problem because I was walking with my feet turned outwards, like a duck feet, which changes how the knee tracks. And that was enough to cause pain. So the moment I relearned how to walk, I've never had problems with knees ever again. And that was before I lost the weight,
Wow.
which was actually more than 10 kilos. It was about 15. So we're talking over 30 pounds.
Wow.
So yeah, and that was before I managed to lose weight. So it was literally just the way I walked that caused my knee problems.
The
And
biomechanics of it, not necessarily related to the diet, removing inflammation, that kind of thing.
no, But I also feel the effects of the diet on my joints and my back, especially because I think I have a little bit of arthritis and had it for a while. I have psoriasis, so I think it just comes with that. But on carnivore, I don't have trouble with that. And I used to have really bad stiffness and pain in my lower back when waking up, that it would take me a few minutes to get moving at all because it was just really stiff and painful. But on carnivore, that's gone. But I'm one of those people that don't tolerate milk and any milk products, not even clarified butter, which is really sad.
That is sad.
But it is what it is. So so yeah, I mean the milk, I guess it's the milk protein. It triggers psoriasis and back pain for me. So there, I mean, I can definitely see these effects of diet and inflammation on joints as well. So I guess in a combination of not walking like a moron and not eating the things that trigger my immune system, my knees and my back are just working really well.
Wow.
And it's so nice to see because I already hear people my age complaining about their backs and joints, and I'm just like not there yet.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Hopefully never.
It's so awesome. You just notice with people that start eating this way, it almost like you forget about those things, kind of like we alluded to earlier, where it's like, oh yeah, like why doesn't my shoulder hurt anymore? It always hurt my shoulder, and I used to get athlete's foot. I don't get athlete's foot anymore. You get tan in the sun. You never sunburn. Like all these different things. It's almost like you forget, and then one day if you sit down and try to remember, like, oh my goodness, I was dealing with so much stuff that I don't have to deal with anymore. It's amazing.
Yeah, right. I mean, I love the carnivore diet, and my plan is to stay on it for as long as it works.
Yep.
It's been
Me too.
5 years and it's working.
Yep.
So
Yeah, that's amazing. I love how you just jumped right into the carnivore diet. But again, knowing you, knowing how studious you are and like how you want to learn and dig into the weeds in a lot of things, what was it like to, I guess, start eating this way and then go back and not only learn about a carnivore diet and why it's kind of how we evolved and everything, but also writing about it. You have an amazing blog post, really reminds me of one of my absolute favorite people to talk to in this entire world, which is Dr. Mickey Bendor, who talks about why we evolved as, carnivores. I love chatting with him, and your blog reminds me a lot of his style. So if somebody were to ask you, if they were open to learn about what you were, why you're eating the way you're eating, scientifically or evolutionarily, how would you explain it to somebody that this is actually the oldest human diet and is not a fad? It's not this short-term thing that you just did for 5 years, to help you with psoriasis, for example.
that's a big question.
Kind of is.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
it's all good. And thank you for the compliment. I mean, Mickey Bendor is a great writer
Amazing.
and good scientist. Yeah, I mean, I am the first one to admit that we don't know everything about the carnivore diet. And more generally speaking, we don't know everything about what human bodies need in terms of diet. Uh, we just don't. And a lot of it is research that is still evolving. But we do know that humans had to survive the Ice Age somehow. And we do know that different indigenous populations like the Inuits in the north, or the Hadza in Africa, they do and did for a long time survive almost solely or completely just on animal products. And there is a lot, I mean, nowadays, I guess, especially if you talk to vegans, some people will argue that humans are herbivores, which, I mean, there's just so many things that go into that equation. But I think most people would probably argue for omnivores. But even almost all omnivore animals in the world heavily lean towards one side. They either primarily live on meat and animal products or plants. There are very few animals that would really need to eat the rainbow. Like why is it enough for koalas to eat eucalyptus and pandas eat bamboo and we have to eat a bit of everything? And then sometimes you hear people talking about how important it is to get purple sweet potatoes in your diet. I mean, I've never seen a purple sweet potato in my life. So it can't be important for humans because and the only thing that is common to the whole world, to every culture, is animal products. There is no, but then I mean, the question of whether it is enough on its own still remains. But I would say that we have enough evidence, both historically, anthropologically, but also from case studies of people who are just fine.
Yep.
And I mean, I completely understand people who think it's crazy, because I used to think it was crazy too. I remember thinking like, it can't be possible, you need vitamins, right? But trying it was just night and day difference. So that in the end, I don't think anyone will be convinced completely until they try.
Good point.
But when it comes to like this myth of fruit and veggies being the best source of vitamins, I remember when I was thinking of having kid number 2, and we weren't carnivore yet. And with all the trouble that my first one had, and I was getting really worried about diet, and I was just trying to put together a diet that should meet all of the recommended daily allowances for each nutrient, vitamins, minerals, everything. And I was just looking at the mainstream information, well, mostly Wikipedia, right? Looking at amounts of how much is in each type of food. And I remember coming to the conclusion that it was not possible. I was like, how am I supposed to get enough folate, which is really important in pregnancy, for example, when the daily needs are much higher? And I was like, I would have to eat asparagus every day, and like 300-400 grams, like basically a pound of asparagus every day.
Oh my gosh.
Or like, or an avocado. It's like, it was just so limited. And then I need the vitamins B as well. Okay, and then I need to eat this or that. And I was like, how am I supposed to put this together? And I remember looking at apples, and I was just like, this has nothing. I remember being so surprised. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. And I was like,
That's right.
the sugar, vitamin C, and that's it. Like, sure, there are a little bits of other things, but it's just like, oh, 1% of your recommended daily dose. And I was like, am I supposed to eat a kilo or like, not a kilo, but 10 kilos of, I mean, impossible.
Yeah.
And a lot of these vitamins and minerals, actually the best source is meat.
Yep.
For so many of them, most of the vitamins B are just more abundant in meat than in anything else. But back then, I still couldn't fathom that I would eat 2 pounds of meat a day.
Yeah.
Like that was not something I was I was entertaining.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's crazy. Wow. I'm
But
thinking about like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, but I was just gonna say that once I came back to carnivore as an idea, and I looked at this list of mine that I made of like all the vitamins and minerals and the best sources of them. And I was like, oh, all of this is working out now. It's like put in 2 pounds, like a kilo of meat, beef, fish, whatever. Like it's working out. I could see like, sure, vitamin C is lower than they recommend, but it's still enough to cover for scurvy. And one could argue whether the extra is actually necessary. And if anyone is worried, there are very simple supplements. But almost everything just looked so much better on a carnivore diet on paper, which is surprising.
Yeah, it is. Well said. I'm thinking about the 5 bananas that you were eating a day at one point and thinking, like, I'm pretty sure bananas are not native to Slovakia, let alone Norway. I don't think that's where they grow. And one of the book club books that we read, I thought was quite interesting. It was written 50 years ago, The Stone Age Diet. There was a kind of difficult book to find, and one example that he gave, I don't know if it's a true story or just an example, but he gave the story of like when we started discovering vitamins, there was a demand from people like yourself, mothers that really cared about nutrients for their kids. And what if they were up north, like requesting fresh fruits and vegetables up north, where stores were like, we don't have any fruits and vegetables in the 1920s, like we don't, they're not in season in February. But if there were a distributor or something there and understood that, you know, tomatoes, for example, fresh tomatoes were going bad by the truckload in the south, if he could get them up north, he could sell them to these mothers that, again, like yourself, just wanted to provide vitamins and minerals for their kids because we were just learning how important they were. So yeah, just to think the practicality of trying to get all of the nutrients that you would need from plants is just it's so difficult. Like you said, it would be impossible. The kilos of apples and how much quinoa you need to eat and combining it with lentils for protein or B12 or you name the nutrient. It's just so challenging. So that's really well said. I like that you explained that.
It's incredibly challenging. And I mean, it's not even taking into account all the anti-nutrients. Like you just mentioned quinoa. Oh, I remember when I once washed it a bit like badly, not enough. I didn't wash my quinoa enough, and there were too many saponins in it. And it's basically soap. It's the same compounds that you have in soap. And my digestive system is not the most robust as it is, so adding some soap to it was not nice. And I remember being like really sick for the rest of the day, and then it was like, oh, I that was badly washed quinoa. And and I mean, I feel awful just thinking about the fact that I was giving that thing to my child in those important years when she needed as much nutrition, safe nutrition as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, quinoa is not the only plant food with a lot of anti-nutrients. Most of them have a fair amount.
Yeah.
I think one of the examples that Dr. Chaffee uses sometimes is like almonds, and that the lethal dose is actually not as big as one would think. I don't remember the numbers right now, so don't quote me on this, but it was under a kilo, which is like under 2 pounds. If you ate some around a pound of almonds, for some people that might give a lethal dose of cyanide. And I'm just like, I used to eat so much almonds because I thought it was one of the safe foods that wasn't triggering anyone, at least for a while. So I would roast like half a kilo of them, which is like a pound almost, and eat it over a day or two. And I'm like, I was
Wow.
actually close to a dose that could probably kill someone smaller.
Wow. That's crazy. Wow.
And that
Yeah.
is
That's
crazy.
That's crazy. No, I know. One of our other book club books, The Great Plant-Based Con by Jane Reese Buxton. I really like the way she's got two chapters that are side by side. That is, one chapter is like, these are all the things you're not going to get enough of, and all the nutrients you're going to miss out on a strictly plant-based vegetarian or vegan diet. And here's all the things you're going to get too much of. And seeing it from both of those perspectives, like you name it, phytates, oxalates, lectins, salicylates. Again, you name it, and you're going to accumulate more of that than you want. And people, when they see almonds, they see the big bag of almonds that you can buy at the store. But if you lived next to an almond tree, how much work would you have to go through to harvest that many almonds, to roast them every other day, to eat a pound of them? That would be a tremendous amount of work to get there. You would not have been able to do it. But now that we have the technology to harvest these plants and grow them and ship them all over the planet, 365 days out of the year in the middle of Norway, you can eat all of the foods that you want. It's a totally different context.
It is. I mean, it makes no sense in a way. I really, for me, it's kind of important to be transparent about the fact that we don't know a lot of things. And especially with human health, the research is so difficult because you can't really put people into isolation and do experiments on them, which is a good thing. But it also means that a lot of what we consider facts nowadays will be disproven within a few decades. And I am a scientist. I've always been. I always wanted to be, and it's my day job. It's kind of how I approach a lot of things, including nutrition. But I think it's really important to remember that we don't always know. But for me, the guiding star often is like, does it make sense from an evolutionary point of view? And I know a lot of people argue with that evolution didn't want us to live past reproduction. But there's also no reason why evolution would make something good for us up till we reproduce and then bad afterwards. And we know that a lot of that animal-based diets are good for fertility, for pregnancy. There, I really love the work of Lily Nichols, who writes about fertility and pregnancy, and her books are amazing. And I often,
Right.
Yeah.
I have her right here. Real Food for Fertility. She's amazing. Yeah, great book.
So, I mean, we know that these things are good for our fertility, which means they are, I mean, and the fertility reflects health. So, and evolution wanted us, if evolution wanted us to be fertile and reproduce safely and effectively, then that meant we had to be healthy. And whatever made us healthy before 30, it's gonna make us healthy after we're 30. So for me, that is really this litmus test of like, does this make sense from an evolutionary point of view? And eating bananas in Norway in December does not make sense from an evolutionary point of view.
No, not much sense.
No, not really.
Well said. And I like what you said earlier. Like, yes, we can do science. We're limited. We'll never probably know. You're right. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's not good for research, but an N of one, a case study. If somebody wants to try this, they can try that and be honest, just like you did. And in a week, things were getting better. If it feels good, you're not even married to being on a carnivore diet for the rest of your life. You just said, I'm doing it so far. Maybe I'll change my mind tomorrow, but it feels good today.
Yeah. I mean, I try to keep an open mind. I am pretty convinced by this point, but I'm really trying hard not to just become dogmatic about it, and just really try to keep a pulse on how I'm feeling and how my health is going. And if things start to change, I am ready to reevaluate. And I actually kind of had to look at it in this last year because I got my third round of COVID about a year ago. And this time, like the first two were just fine, and the third one really knocked me out.
Wow.
And I just couldn't get back to normal. I kept getting infection after infection, and they were worse than usual. And I was really like, what is going on? And I ended up having to go on a several months long sick leave because I just couldn't function. That was
Wow.
last winter. And I ended up sleeping like 15 hours a day because I
Oh my
was
goodness.
just so tired. And I mean, I believe I had long COVID, although my doctor diagnosed me as being a parent of small kids, but I had those kids for a few years already, so I don't quite agree with that diagnosis. Um, and I was considering like, is carnivore actually helping with this, or is it making it worse? And I mean, it was around the same time as I was trying to reintroduce milk into my diet. But what I tried first was I tried to go more strict, and I did like lion diet, meat and salt only for a while, and I saw improvement with that. So I think COVID triggered my immune system somehow. So I was getting constant infections with really exaggerated immune response, and a lot of my autoimmune symptoms came back. I had rashes again that I didn't have for years, and back pain that I didn't have for a long time.
Wow.
So it made sense to try to double down on carnivore. So that was what I did first, but I was ready to consider that maybe it's not the answer, but I yeah, I mean it took about a half a year before I started feeling closer to normal again.
Wow.
And it's been about a year now, and I'd say I'm 95% back to normal, which from all the stories I've heard about long COVID, it's either very lucky or I guess the way I managed it was
Wow.
successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I mean, only speculation at this point, but yeah, that's interesting to contemplate for sure. And yeah, I love that curious nature about yourself and how you look at things scientifically. And I love that you bring that to book club. As you're thinking about the time that you've been in book club, do you just, it could be something recent, it could be something that was, major that really affected your life, but what are some of your favorite moments? Do you have any moments that stand out from book club that like you really think of fondly when you reflect on your time of what you're saying? When I totally agree is like one of your favorite hours of the week.
Oh, I mean, there are so many lovely moments from book club. I love how the discussions always goes into go in unexpected ways. Like you never know what we end up talking about. Um, I remember once, it was quite early after I joined book club. Um, I don't remember which book we were reading. It could have been Malcolm Kendrick's The Clot Thickens. That could be the one. But there was a chapter about how mental health and stress affect cardiovascular disease risk. Uh, and one of the members of our book club, um, he did not attend that session because he couldn't, but he watched the replay later. And and in that one, a lot of us shared kind of the more personal struggles we have with. I mean, I'm neurodivergent, and and it does cause some stress in my life. Some members have PTSD, so we were sort of sharing these more vulnerable moments. Um, which was incredibly nice and moving. But that wasn't all. Like afterwards, this other guy who wasn't there for that book club but watched the replay, uh, he felt so moved by all the discussions that he offered. He has like hypnosis company, and they do hypnosis recordings, and some of it is really helpful for PTSD or stress or other struggles. And so he offered a lot of us like free memberships to get started, which was really, I mean, that's kind of the atmosphere you get in our book club. Like people are just so nice and supportive and kind to each other. And I have to say that I did take him up on the offer for the hypnosis, and I credit it with helping me beat the sugar addiction.
Yeah.
Because for me, that was what it took. I actually had to use hypnosis to stop the cycle of binging.
Yeah. You wrote about it beautifully in your blog, by the way.
Thank you. I mean, for me, it was just such a big part of that recovery from addiction. That it's a very strong tool. It was more powerful than I would have ever expected.
Yeah. I just talked to a hypnotherapist actually on the show, who also uses a carnivore diet, and learning about it, there's a lot of myths and misconceptions that I had in my mind, and having that explained and how it helps so many people with food addiction, sugar addiction, that kind of thing was really quite revealing. So it was interesting to learn about that. And like I said, you wrote about it really beautifully, and I think people will really appreciate that. Nori, this has been fantastic. It's thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you and learning from you, and I know our listeners will feel the same. It's been great to get to know you. I really hope this isn't your last time on our podcast or any other podcast, because you're incredibly articulate and very thoughtful. And it's just been such a joy to host you on the show. Where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for this wonderful chat. I had such a good time, and I can't believe that the hour has passed already.
So fast.
Yeah, and you can find me on noriparelius.com. I guess Casey will write that in the show notes. Um, I'm not much on social media. I'm planning to start a YouTube, but if you get on my blog, then you'll find out when that happens. And you can find me in Dr. Chaffee's Patreon and book club. Yeah, I guess that's where I usually hang out.
Excellent. We will link those up. You're not missing anything on social media right now. Just going through an election cycle here in the United States is not the best time for social media. So if you haven't started yet, I wouldn't start now. But we'll be sure to link the Patreon. We'll be sure to link the book club.
Yeah, it's more that I quit social media just for my own
Smart.
peace of mind. And yes, today has been quite the roller coaster
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
you guys.
Definitely has. Yeah, totally. But we'll be sure to link that and link Dr. Chaffee's Patreon and his book club and everything. And we'll be sure to link your website. But Nori, again, thank you so very much for appearing on our show and explaining your story. It's quite inspiring, and we really, really appreciate you and your kind message. So thank you again so very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.